Welcome to the Festival of Storytellers. I thank everybody that's involved with this process because we know writers need readers and writers need publishers. Experience is not about the publisher, it is about us, the authors.
Our next session is an open mic session facilitated by one of Reader's Magnet's valued author, Ellie. Ellie is an accomplished author, speaker, and home cook-baker with a diverse background as a legislative and policy analyst for the state of Colorado and the city and county of Broomfield. Ellie's career took a significant turn when she became a full-time caregiver for her mother after a life-altering accident. During her mother's 9.5 years of care, Ellie documented her personal journey in her book, One Caregiver's Journey. Filled with heartfelt memories, insightful advice, and a touch of humor, this book offers a snapshot of the realities, changes, and challenges of caregiving. It is a must-read for anyone currently or considering taking on the role of a caregiver. Joining Ellie are 4 other talented authors who captivate our minds and steer our hearts with their words as we embark on a journey through their enchanting works and discover the magic they have woven into their stories. We have David Stewart, author of the book Psychic Redemption, Edward Lipinski, author of the books Werewolf on Madison Avenue and Visions of Destiny, Stephen Auslander, author of the book The Streamlined Locomotive, and last but not the least, Scott Harrell, author of the book Moonlock. Get ready to be inspired and entertained as we delve into this amazing author's journey. Without further ado, please join me in giving a warm welcome to David Stewart, Edward Lipinski, Stephen Auslander, Scott Harrell, with Ellie. Welcome to the Festival of Storytellers. This is the last session of Chapter 5. I welcome you. An extraordinary event, international event for authors and fairgoers. I am the author of One Caregiver's Journey and Generations of Good Food. I would like to remind everyone that we are live on all of the platforms of Reader's Magnet. So please subscribe and join in. And let's get started with this. This is a first for Reader's Magnet and for me. We're going to have a discussion with 4 talented gentlemen who have either written futuristic science fiction books or science fiction. Now, I know that they have things in common with each other. And gentlemen, I will ask the questions, and I just invite the 4 of you to have discussions. If you have something to say, then just give me a cue and I can call on you. Let's go around, David, Scott, Edward, and Stephen, and give us a brief synopsis of you and your book. David, we'll start with you.
Okay, my name is David Witherington Stewart. I'm a Florida author. I'm 85 years old. I'm widowed. My wife died in 1999. Of the 6 books, the one science fiction book that I've written is my most recent book, which is Angel of Mortality. It basically combines the technologies of nanotechnology, artificial intelligence, quantum computing, and smart materials to make an organism which is basically a living organism that covers continents. And the reason that the protagonist, Raisa, invented this machine was to do good, to help with climate change, with the ocean pollution, with reforestation, and so on. But a bad guy who works for the transnational crime syndicate gets a hold of the design, and he uses it to try and diminish the population of the earth to people only loyal to him, so that he can become a dictator to the earth. The other books that I've published are Psychic Redemption, which is a paranormal where a spirit of a 16-year-old girl comes back to discover her baby that she never saw when it was born. Within the Wind, which is about a Category 5 hurricane that hits Florida, and a paramedic tries to save a woman's life in the middle of the storm. Serious Consequences, which is an international thriller where Aggie testifies to the Criminal Court of Justice, the International Criminal Court of Justice, and gets put in witness protection. Cabrera Landing, which is a fantasy where they go back to 17,000 BC Florida, and my memoir, which is Seeking Success, which is 40 years of the space program and 13 years in private business. Thank you, Ellie.
I thank you, sir. Scott, I think Scott is next to David. Scott, tell us about Moonluck. I know a lot about Scott.
Yes, we've had quite a few discussions together through Reader's Magnet, and thank you, Ellie, for monitoring today. Moonluck is a book that I wrote out based on passion. My life has been in the engineering field, mostly construction management, and I've worked all over the world, Middle East, building rail systems around the world. But I've always had a passion for science and science fiction. And one of my, what I didn't like about it is some of them get so much fantasy. I like the concept of taking the science a little bit that exists and make it more realistic. And it struck me one day after a friend that had written a book that I could do this, I could write it, and I did. I attacked it, planned it out as any engineer would. Chapter by chapter was all planned out, and then wrote it. And basically, what the story is, Moonluck is about living on the moon less than 20 years from now. In fact, I believe, and my colleagues here might be able to add in, but I expect we'll be having our first base on the moon with short-term living conditions is maybe in the next 6 to 8 years. I believe we'll be on the moon. And I take it about 10 years after that, after being established. People that will be there first, and this can be a subject to argument, but it is my belief that China will be there before us. And I put it this way: why did we go to the moon 50 years ago? Well, we had to beat the Russians. We beat the Russians. Why haven't we gone back in 50 years? Nobody to beat. Why are we in a big race to go back now? Because China's going there. And that's what gets us motivated to do things, apparently. But having said that, I assume that the Chinese will be there. We'll be there. And guess what? When we're off planet, we all get along just fine. There's some good relationships there I talk about. But just to make it interesting, and I do talk a lot about science, at current science of living on the moon, but to make it interesting, it's a murder mystery. Because humankind can't go too long off on something good before something bad happens. So the murder mystery basically is there to carry the story and allow me to talk about various things, like such as how do you solve a murder on the moon, and also, is it murder if it happens on the moon? Did somebody violate a law? It's a very interesting approach. Did a lot of research to trying to get those answers.
So Scott, have you
yes.
have Are you still writing your second book?
I am. I haven't progressed nearly as fast. The second book is a sequel. I'm about a third of the way through it.
Okay.
This will be about 2 years after this one, and a little different twist. I won't want to talk. Well, I can talk about it later, but I'm
Okay.
making progress
Well,
slowly.
well, Scott, I will say back
Okay.
before the Challenger happened, I was the manager for advanced engineering for Rockwell,
Huh?
and we were actually working on putting together a moon colony thing with the Chinese, the Japanese, the French,
Hmm.
Floor Daniel, and Harris. And then when the Challenger happened, everything went on hold, and then everything changed, of course, after the Challenger. So that's part of what interrupted that program.
No
Okay.
doubt. And then I'm sure a few
Wait, gentlemen,
political
wait,
things
hold
too.
on, guys.
Okay,
Time out.
sure.
Before we get into the discussions, let's hear from our other two authors. Edward, tell us about your books and about you.
It's my turn, is it?
Oh
I
man, this is going to be an hour. Okay, tell me about you.
Okay, I'll try to hold it to less than an hour. I worked in after I was in the Air Force and I left the Air Force. I worked in advertising, art and design. I started as an illustrator, and I had one book at the time. It's Picasso, the Cat Who Wanted to Be an Artist. It's a children's book. I wrote it and I illustrated it. And after that, I spent time illustrating for magazines and books. And then I became an illustrator for the New York Times. And I wrote and illustrated the home improvement column for the New York Times for 5 years. After the Times had changed their format and they didn't have any use for independent columns, I started going back to illustrating and designing, and recently published a number of books with Reader's Magnet. And one of the books is Werewolf on Madison Avenue. It's a story of a man who wants to be an advertising copywriter. He's a young, idealistic man. And unfortunately, he gets into an advertising agency, which is really a crass, unscrupulous advertising agency. And to make matters worse, he decides to take a vacation in the Yucatan, and he gets bitten by a werewolf, and he becomes one. And so this book answers the question, can a man be a werewolf and still have a daytime job? After that, I wrote another book. Well, you have to read the book to find out. I wrote another book called Visions of Destiny, and it's a Werewolf on Madison Avenue is a horror story, but it also contains a great deal of fiction. Visions of Destiny is more serious. It's about a young man who grows up and he has glimpses into the future. He can see what's going to happen next. Now, he can't tell everything that's going to happen. He can't tell who the next president's going to be, but he gets these little incidences of accidents, things that are going to happen, and it gets him into all sorts of situations. And that's what this book is all about. I recently did another book called Echoes of the Past, and it's about a young woman who's just graduated from college, and she's never met her father. Her father disappeared before she was born, and now she wants to do her big quest now is to go after her father and find out where he is and what he has become and why he left her so early. The book is long; it's over 600 some odd pages, so we decided to publish it in two parts. Part one shows Audrey, the young girl, searching, and part two, when she starts to find her father. On her way, she runs into adventures, as you can see on this cover. She runs into a tiger. She's kidnapped, but eventually she does find her father, and her father explains the truth of why he left. And it turns out to be a surprise and a shock for young Audrey. That's about me.
Okay. And our last author is Stephen. Stephen, tell us a little bit about you, your books, and then we can get into discussions with all four of you.
Okay. The book is The Streamline Locomotive. How to
Okay.
get used to the reversal
Okay.
of.
All right, we can see it.
This is what it looks like.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Okay. Memorize it. Run down to the local bookstore and buy a copy. You know, I started it. I've been a sculptor for 55 years. And I was thinking I should say more than through my sculpture, which is surrealistic. Because when you do surrealism, you're not really giving forth a message, you're just stimulating responses from the viewer. And I thought I'd get a little bit more control. Now, that started with I was reading a story or something, and it was about an Englishman, one of the noble people or the upper crust, who's and his he had a four cylinder four syllable last name, and the last two syllables were bottom. So I decided to change that around, and I came up with the name Bezel Bottom. I kind of like that. It sort of flows together. And then when I did, I said, now I got this. What am I going to do with the name? I should put it on the character. So I invented the character Throckmorton P. Bezel Bottom. I like the name. I like big, complicated names like that. Unusual for America. And he's an old-fashioned robber baron, but he's living in the mid 20th century, or the first half of the 20th century. And he owns a railroad that goes across the country, Chicago Pacific and Eastern. And he and his brother and his family, they just about own a county in Appalachia. I'm not going to name the state. Appalachia covers something like about 8 different states. So, you figure it out if you want to give it that much detail. And
Okay. So
you want me to talk more? Or shut up.
No, let's get in. We're at almost 20 minutes. So let me ask the first question of our 4 men. Thank you very much, Stephen. Let's ask the question of our 4 men. The first question is, and I'll put this off to David to start out with, and then I just invite you all to talk and to interject your thoughts as we go through this. As an author, do you ever find it challenging to strike a balance between creating a captivating story, exploring deeper themes or messages, and how do you navigate the process of balance in writing? Because you're all writing about something that's kind of pretty much out there, gentlemen. David, you start out with the how do you strike a balance between creating your story and the deeper themes? And gentlemen, jump in and give us your answer. Start it off, David.
Well, I always start with the character, and I let the character more or less define what the story is going to be. And then when I start writing the story through the first draft, I eventually find a theme. And so the first draft is always kind of a discovery process in which the character goes out to discover what they're going to do and what it's going to mean. Then I go back to start a really detailed outline and into the second draft. And in the second draft, the character really begins to take on the story. So I'm very character driven in my novels.
Okay. Anybody else? Scott? Any Edward? Stephen, you want to talk about how you how do you find the balance in creating your stories and the deeper themes and messages?
Well, I don't know if there's a deeper theme anywhere in my work. It's I don't look for a theme. I start writing, and it comes to me. So essentially, I have this character who's the nephew of the Throckmorton, the Bezelbottom brothers, and he's wealthy, and he has all sorts of money, and he doesn't want to do anything because he's been spoiled rotten. And also, it's 1940, beginning of 1941. The war in Europe and Asia is raging, and everybody is coming to the conclusion, not everybody who thinks, is coming to the conclusion we're going to be in this war pretty soon. So he has to, his uncles tell him that he has to shape up or ship out essentially, and he has to do some work for them. And the other uncle, who's the mild mannered one who runs the county of Hallward, he says they have a little short line railroad that runs from the top of the county down to the bottom.
So you develop all of this just as you're starting to write, then you develop your story. That's how you basically create your balance.
Yeah, it's created in my subconscious and it comes out on the
Okay.
typewriter.
Okay, Scott, tell us about you, and then Edward, you can tell us about Edward's.
Well, Ellie, it seemed like I'm opposite of the other two there. I have
That's fine.
my book was meticulously outlined. Any creativity was done during the outline. So I had it totally laid out. It was researched so that I could keep the science accurate. And not just science, even elements such as legal scenarios that can occur in space. That's just my nature, being from uh, being an engineer and construction person. So my creativity, even the people in every single person in my book, and there's a lot of characters, are all somebody in my life that made it actually very easy for me to be consistent and write about people in my book, the characters in my book, because I could see them and see them based on my experiences. And these are people from all over the world, from different countries. So
Okay.
uh, that took the creativity out.
Well, okay, but you had an outline in. Edward, tell us about how you strike a balance between creating your story and exploring the deeper messages.
I think the story first. I get an idea for the story. I don't know where the inspiration originally comes from, but then I get a broad outline of the character, what he or she is going to do, how they're going to run into other characters, and this is all a thought process. I don't put anything down on paper. So when I go to write, I've really got the story in my head, and it's just a question of realizing it on paper. And so when I'm writing one story, I may be thinking about others. I could be thinking about it not by sitting here in my living room and contemplating, but sometimes when I'm walking on this, riding on the subway or any place. But I'll think the whole story out first. And when it comes time to put that down on paper, I know how it's going to begin, I know how it's going to end, and I know what's going to happen in between.
So let's just leave it. Let's leave all of the men up like this for a minute, because I want to hear all of you talk about the role of artificial intelligence and robotics, how it's changing and shaping society in the future. And all of your books have some futuristicness to them. David, you were talking about it. I know Scott uses it in his books, and for as many books as Edward has, I'm sure at some point it comes into there. David, talk to us.
Well, I look
about
at
AI and robotics and how it's going to shape the future, and then gentlemen, have a conversation amongst yourselves.
I look at it like we looked at the Apollo program, and that is that you've got multiple technologies that have to be combined. So it's going to take thousands of people to basically put something together that's meaningful. And that's why in my book where Raisa creates Eve, she goes to all 7 continents and gets a sign-on by people to basically create and allow this thing to happen. And, Scott was talking about the ethics and the legality and so on like that. The ethics and morality of artificial intelligence and nanotechnology and robotics combined is an extremely complex subject. And she basically goes to the United Nations to get help with that.
Yes. Scott, what do you think about AI and robotics? Obviously, it's going to have something to do with being on the moon.
I think so. You're definitely going to have it, but I think initially, and that's what I'm writing, I think initially it's going to be very rigid programs. I think David was just kind of referring to the thousands of people involved, and putting something together. I don't think that there'll be a substantive amount of artificial intelligence in that process. Robotics, yes, but I think it's going to be people. My story is about the people living on the moon and how they're surviving. And I see the AI part down the road. It's going to be down the road.
Okay. Okay. Um,
Mhm.
Edward, what do you think?
Well, I can't speak about robotics at all because I don't know too much about it. But I am reading a book currently on AI, and I'm very interested in how AI is going to affect the writing profession. It came to the surface recently with the writer's strike in California because the writers are getting very much afraid of AI. I'm not particularly. I don't think we're at the stage now where AI can write a novel, and you can't go to AI and say, "Please write me a Western." But if you have enough of the character and enough of the plot outline, AI can certainly help. And I think writers are very concerned that maybe it's going to take inroads. I don't think it's going to affect novelists at this time. I don't think it's going to affect playwrights, but I think it may affect people who are writing sitcoms or um, uh, soap operas or something like that, where you have a repetitive character and a repetitive situation. So at this point, I can't talk in general about how AI is going to affect medicine or how it's going to affect travel or anything like that. But I am concerned about how the inroads it's making in the writing profession.
I think it's. Do any of the rest of you have any? Stephen, um, your books don't exactly go into artificial intelligence, but do you have any thoughts on artificial intelligence and robotics, how they'll shape the future?
Well, I was in the field of production line machinery, and obviously that AI and robotics is part of that. And it just that
Mm-hmm.
I left that and went into surrealism, and so whatever it is, it's I ignore the whole thing. The I did the first book, Streamline Locomotive. When I finished it, I realized it was part of a series, and then but I ended up doing I'm doing two prequels and one sequel from that because it's Streamline Locomotive runs from 1941 through 1942, and
Okay.
and then the final book will be he's in the Balkan country called Bulgaria, and uh, the Nazis are trying to invade it. And Bulgaria is this interesting country. It's so mountainous and so convoluted that everybody who's tried to invade it got lost, and so badly lost they just settled. And then so we end up with the European country called the Balkans country called Bulgaria, being like Switzerland, where they have different uh, cantons in Switzerland. They have a different language. They're not all speaking the same language, but they get along together. And that'll be
Thank you.
explored more in my last book.
Let me say one thing, Ellie.
Yes, David,
You know,
please.
to Scott and Ed, I think that most people's view, they look at AI as being medical applications. They look at and they look at AI as being communications and finance. They look at nanotechnology as being medical. All of these things, they're going to be expanded. They're much broader than that, because what's going to happen is the world is in chaos right now, and it's going to be more chaotic. And when it becomes fully chaotic, we're going to have to make drastic solutions. And we're going to have to do what we did before, and that is get Russia, the United States, and China, and everybody together and solve big problems. And those big problems are going to require applications of these technologies that go far beyond the present view of the vision of what they are.
Edward, what do you think about that?
Well, that's going very far into the future, and I think that there's no doubt that we are going into a complex world, and we're going to have to find new ways of solving old problems because the problems that were old are going to evolve into new problems. And so I would imagine we're going to find new applications for AI and robotics if only to help control our climate and to control some of the actually control some of the problems with the internet and with weaponry and with relations with other countries. How that's going to affect us and how we're going to do that is an open question at this point, at least for me.
Scott, you've got years of engineering experience. Tell me about your feelings about all of this.
I kind of like what David had to say about it. I think there is it affects different elements. What I don't agree with is that I don't think, excuse me, I don't see countries really get together. Russia, for example, is going to go the way of North Korea. Oh, excuse me. And what I see is China being our challenge, and we'll get along with them. They're a capitalistic country, despite their government, and that's what's going to make this. They're going to take care. They're going to look out for themselves, and yes, they're going
I
to
think
have
so.
artificial intelligence.
But I
They're-
worked
they'll
with
build-
I worked with Russia on Apollo Soyuz, and I worked with them on sea launch. And I think we're all going to come together before it's done because it's all going to get so drastic. We're just going to have to cooperate.
Okay.
Well,
Stephen,
it depends on what the government does.
Well, the government depends on what the people do.
Good luck.
Argumentative.
Perhaps. Let me find another question. When it comes to world building in your fiction, what elements do you prioritize in order to create a rich and immersive setting for your readings? What is there any particular inspiration or influences that guide you in your world building decisions? And that's for the science fiction, when you build your science fiction world. Edward.
Oh, that's a difficult question to answer. And it's difficult for me because I'm not sure where my inspiration comes from. As I say, ideas bounce around in my head for a long time before I sit down and actually write about them. And when a problem comes up that I'm wondering about, then maybe I'll do some research on the internet or at the library or talk to people who are knowledgeable. But as for world building, I think that comes partly from experience and partly from imagination. But I have no actually method for doing that. No tried and true method that I refer to all the time.
Stephen, do you try to immerse your readers in a setting? Obviously, your book is only from 1 to 2 years, but do you try to immerse them into that setting for that time?
Well, we have to because the time, the elements that's happening in that time affect the characters. They can't act independently of their environment, and we have to. So basically, the second book runs, like I said, 1940 through early 1942, and then the first book after I did the my first book, it turns out to be the third book in the series. So I went back, and the second book, which is being printed right now, runs from 1908 through 1922, and that covers World War I aviation. And
Okay.
I have two new characters, and they get involved in the they get involved with the problems of killing each other and the war, and so it's interesting to me anyway. See, I wouldn't even consider the current things of AI and robotics. I'm still back living in the when I was a kid, because I'm the same age as David. I'm 85, and I grew up during the World War II, and that had the major influence on me. And I have my characters in there, and they're behaving as they're behaving within that environment. And I've done a lot of research on that environment. It was easier because I grew up in that environment. So
So
go
I'm
ahead.
almost afraid to ask the next question, which is, how does the political landscape differ in your futuristic universe? And how does the political landscape impact the lives of your characters? David, did you hear that, or would you like me to repeat that question?
I heard that.
Okay.
I'm an 85-year-old person. I had to leave for a moment. Yeah,
Welcome to the club.
I will answer that. My last book takes place in Bishkek, Kyrgyzstan. And if you're not familiar with Kyrgyzstan, they basically threw out Russian corruption, even though they're currently a member of the CIS. But it affects it in that every time Raisa goes to sell her device, this intelligent robot, to a different country, and she goes to Brazil, she goes to Nigeria, she goes to the United States, she goes to England, all these different places. Each time she has to take into account the political atmosphere in that particular country and how they relate to the United Nations, because she's trying to get the Center for Automation and Robotics, which is part of the United Nations, to basically agree to allow her to let this device loose, to let it out. And the only thing that finally convinces them to let it loose is when the bad guy uses it to create a plague, a worldwide plague. And she has to let the good robot loose, basically, in order to solve the plague and to solve the further attacks. So it becomes, it isn't a reasoned decision. It's a reaction to what's going on. When you're attacked, you have to react. So the only way the world becomes united in this thing is the fact that they are all under attack by this transnational crime syndicate, and they all have to react in order to basically put a quiet to it. And that brings the world together. And I think that's what brings the world together. It isn't reasonable negotiations. It's a reaction to catastrophe. And that's more or less what in my book causes the world to unite in this thing.
Scott, what do you think about political landscapes?
Well, David says it takes a catastrophe to bring people together. I don't see the catastrophe in my book in the near future. In fact, I see it as people getting along, getting together. I wrote this book almost 4 years ago and predicted then that Russia would not have a part in the future of space. It seems like that is bared out. Their government, despite the fact that they may have some brilliant scientists who would like to help and participate, their government is not structured to do that, in my opinion. Whereas where I see China just the opposite. They're very motivated to be a part of the world, functional part. And I'd also one thing I forgot to mention, of course, is my story is very international. It's a joint venture of the European Space Agency, which comprises multiple countries, and the United States and some others, and some countries that are like Canada is going to be in my book. And in my sequel, Japan has a very important role in the future, as does, believe it or not, Israel and India. I see them, if they survive this, what's going on right now. I see Israel has a very prominent space program, and so does India. So these are countries that I see that will be doing something in the future that will be on the moon. What's that?
Wow. The political landscape, just between the two of you. Edward, do you want to wade into the political landscape, or do you want us to look for something else?
I'm not going to wade in very deeply because my books don't have a strong political background. They're actually very personal, focused on one or two characters in an environment. The closest to a political landscape is in Visions of Destiny, where the protagonist sees a catastrophe in the making. He tries to warn people about it, and the FBI comes in, but the FBI doesn't work so much as an agency of the government, but each agent has its own agenda to follow. So it's not a strong political statement. I just don't get involved in the wide political landscape. Sorry to disappoint you, but that's the way it
No,
is.
you're not
Well,
disappointing me at all, sir.
Okay.
Not at all.
of course,
Uh,
my book Serious Consequences is about the transnational crime syndicate. So it basically goes to the World Court, the International Court of Justice, the International Criminal Court of Justice. So it's very, very international in its scope. It's international all the way.
Okay, gentlemen, let's do. I'm going to ask the people backstage to give us some hashtags, and it's one word. And I'm going to give you each just a few minutes to tell me something about that hashtag, what it means to you.
Okay.
QR, do we have some hashtags?
Well, I see nanotechnology.
Okay, so here comes our first. Here comes. It's coming. Mechanical design for Stephen. Mechanical design. Stephen,
Yeah.
talk to me about mechanical design very briefly. Then we'll go to another one.
Well, it's mechanical. It's design of machinery, and that's what we do. Every factory is has machinery, and we control it. We design the machines. We build them. We improve them. We compete. Companies compete against each other with their machinery. We it's been said that one of the reasons we won World War II is because uh, we outproduced the Germans, like about in some cases a ratio of 10-1, and and they certainly did with the Japanese. After we knocked out all their carriers and their battleships, they were gone. They were just hanging on by their fingernails. The it's I keep up with it. I keep up with the latest things, especially with the electronics and the lasers. And I'm always astounded. When I was a kid back in the 40s, the comic books were talking about death rays, and the character would zip up a little thing, bzz, and people would dissolve and blow up or whatever. And we had that, but now we're doing that. We haven't made it small and carryable, but um, we destroy things with high intensity lasers, and so we don't
Yes, we
have to
do.
use.
David, what's your talk to me about mechanical design?
About mechanical design, well, of course, I was in computer and avionics design, but mechanical design, number one, has to be very localized, very specialized to what's trying to go on. You don't produce machines that are going to be general purpose very much. Usually, they're very specialized things.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things I found out with mechanical design is that you can do an awful lot with material science. If you use the right material, you can make a lot of things happen, but you have to be very careful about your selection of material. And of course, on the shuttle, we not only had the tiles, which are famous, but we also had a beryllium navigation platform. And beryllium was used because it's very, very stable. So there's a lot of things, if you understand the materials and the material science and how to do the construction, that you can create innovative mechanical designs to do specialized functions.
QR, send me another one.
Who?
Scott, talk about astronauts.
Astronauts. Well, that's a general term, covers several countries, but other countries have different names for it. And of course, Russians, everybody knows that the Russians were cosmonauts, probably lesser known, but the Chinese, theirs are referred to as taekwonauts. Astronauts in general, if we group them all under one heading there, you get them out in space, you get them working together, and they get along just fine, as I said. It's a new thing, a new environment, and people of that caliber want to do good things. And that's
How
what
many different countries have sent people to the International Space Station? Do you know?
wow, that's a great question. I think it's been at least
Well, thank
10.
you.
Maybe I think at least 10 that comes to mind, but maybe
And
more.
they all get along just swell.
What's that? I'm sorry.
They all get along just swell.
They get along just fine, just fine.
Uh-huh.
And that's what I
Mm-hmm.
see in the future. Yes, I have it's a murder mystery in my book, but as I said, that's really to help me carry the story, and provide a vehicle, if you will. But in truth, I truly believe when we first go to the moon and in the future, will get along just fine until we become overpopulated, and then we'll have problems.
So, Edward, I'm going to throw out your hashtag,
Oh,
which is going to
throw it
be,
away or throw it out.
I'm just going to throw it out.
Oh
I'm
no,
not
that's
going
for
to
me.
throw it
That's mine
away.
again.
That was
Oh, there we go.
Scott. No, that was David's. We've already heard that. I was thinking more of werewolf for Edward. No,
Well,
we've
you
got
want me to
that.
talk about?
There
Oh,
you
okay.
go.
Werewolf.
Hashtag werewolf.
The
Edward,
werewolf.
what does that mean to you?
The werewolf is a concept that most people think of, or early folklore thought of, is the person getting in touch with a primitive animal self. This was explored in Robert Louis Stevenson's Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, although Mr. Hyde was not a werewolf. But the idea of a human, normal person becoming some sort of animal. We all have that animal instinct in it. And the legend of the werewolf goes back to the medieval times. I'm not exactly sure where or what. But the one thing about the werewolf when I was writing the book is that it's a different character than the other monsters. If you think of the monsters, the typical big three monsters, there's Dracula, there's Frankenstein, and there's the werewolf. And then the little monsters are the creature of the Black Lagoon and the Invisible Man. And they all have one thing in common except the werewolf. They're full-time monsters. But the werewolf is only a monster one night out of the month. That's the night of the full moon. And the rest of the time, he could keep his day job. That's kind of what we explore. That's kind of what we explore in Werewolf on Madison Avenue.
That's pretty cool. Okay, what else? Scott, talk to us about Italy. That came up.
Oh yeah. Oh well, that's it's my home away from home, if you will. The house you see in the background, that's where my wife was actually born. And a few years back, we've inherited it along with her brother, who's also here in California. And we share it. We get along just fine, as if we were astronauts. And we are trying to bring that house into the current century. I'm there. I'll be bringing, modernizing it and making it a little more to our comfort. But I love Italy. I love traveling. I've everywhere. I've been now to 61 different countries, and I've still got a goal to go hit a few more before long. I'm hitting Morocco. We're going to Italy. I'll be there this Thursday, Friday, and during that turn, our stay there, we're going to hit Morocco. In October, going to Poland, another new country. So I love seeing the world, and I see the best of people when I'm out in these countries. And
So, Scott,
Mhm.
gentlemen, I do know that Scott and his wife took an around the world cruise. Did you
Mhm.
finish it because you had to cut it short during the pandemic, as I remember? Did you finish your around the world cruise?
The cruise was the same length. It was 4.5 months. It just didn't get around the world. They took a reroute, and we wound up going down south along South America and around Cape Good Horn and hitting Chile, Uruguay, and some of the coastal countries uh, there before heading back over to the Mediterranean for about 3 months there. But so it didn't get cut short. It just didn't get to go around the world. But I
Okay.
truly enjoyed the experience.
So, David, nanotechnology.
Yeah. Nanotechnology is the least talked about and the least understood of the major technologies under development today. And what nanotechnology involves, it involves nanobots. They are microscopic and submicroscopic robots that can do specialized functions, like, for example, repair a tooth or kill a cancer cell. And when you put them together, 1,000 or 2,000 different kinds, what you can do is create organs. And those organs do specialized functions like, for example, absorb sunlight and create energy and distribute the energy, or digest organic food, or reproduce other nanobots. I mean, all kinds of things that can happen. And in my book, what happens is I make organs out of these nanobots that I call xenobots. And then out of the xenobots, I create xenoborgs, which are basically giant robotic organizations that are composed of trillions of nanobots. So it's a technology that's still much underdeveloped. Keeping up with it is a real chore because there are hundreds of new things that happen every day. And if you don't stay up with the technology, you don't really know what's going on.
That's true. Okay, gentlemen, I'd like to, we still have 9 minutes left in the session, but I'd like to give you the opportunity to promote and announce where people can grab your books, and your social media, how they can keep in touch with you, your web pages. So let's start with Stephen. Stephen, where can people tell us about where can they get Streamline Locomotive? Where is that for sale? And are you on social media at all?
Well, the Amazon and Barnes and Noble carry the book.
Okay.
It's both hardbound and softbound, and Kindle. The let's see, what's the rest of it?
Are you on social media?
Well, I have a website. I haven't got much on it yet. It's SL Auslander arts.com.
Okay.
And you get up there and you get a picture of me and a picture of a non-streamline locomotive, for the book. And that's it so far. Also, I'm on Facebook, and people send me questions, and I'm on Instagram. I think that's what they call it. But I've never checked out my site on Instagram. So, the problem with all this, communicating with other people is it takes time away from writing and from living. I got things I have to do. And my wife and I are not hoarders. We're accumulators. That's a nice way of saying it. We accumulate. And we've been going through, we're both artists, and we've been going through our areas of the house and starting to clean everything out. So I've got stuff.
So tell me why should people buy your book?
Well, this is the first book, and it's funny. It's a humorous book. It's watching this character deal with his problems, and it gets funny. And other people said it's a very entertaining, funny book. Which these are books I gave to people, not that they bought it. And it's you're not going to know what the book is like until you actually go and buy a copy.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more there. David, tell us about where we can grab a copy of your book, if you're on social media, and why should people buy your books?
Okay, well, Within the Wind and Seeking Success are only available on Amazon. My other books are available on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, or Reader's Magnet. Also, if someone wants to get on my website and talk to me on the blog, or if they want to email me or text me, I'll be glad to send them a copy of the book, any of the work they want, and I'll probably give them a reduced price. But
why should people grab your books?
Why should people grab my books? Well, Number one is Psychic Redemption and Serious Consequences and Angel of Mortality have all gotten 5-star reviews. They're very definitely well-written books. Within the Wind, I believe it's a well-written book, but it does have flaws. It's gotten 4-star reviews. Cabrera Landing got a poor review to start with, but actually it's a much better book than the review, because I talked to the person who gave the review. It was a mistake on his part. And Seeking Success, if you want to know about the space program, the 40 years that I was in it, there's a lot of detail there that people don't know. I was lead engineer on Apollo 13. I was on the first Atlas launch. I was there for the John Glenn flight on Project Mercury. I was on the launch team for the Titan Gemini missions, all of them. So, and then I was there for the first shuttle. I was the supervisor for software development, for flight software development for the first shuttle. So there's a lot of things that I did that are kind of unusual, that if people read Seeking Success, they will find a lot there.
Are
Plus,
you on social media?
I am. It's davidsbooks.com, I think. Anyway, I've got a website.
And
Readers,
are you on Facebook or Instagram or?
I'm on Facebook, but I never check Instagram. I don't even know how to use it.
Okay.
So Facebook, yeah, you can talk to me on Facebook any time and send me messages on Messenger, and I'll answer them.
Okay.
As long as you don't look like you're somebody who's trying to sell me something. You know, I get too much of that. Or
I
there's
get
some,
that. Okay.
yeah.
Thank you. Scott.
Okay.
Oh,
We got 3 minutes left, so I'll do this in a minute. Leave some time for Edward. Okay. ScottHarrell.com is my website. Also on Facebook. You can find me there. My book is available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Reader's Magnet. There's a regular copy, a hardcover copy, an ebook, and soon to come out through Reader's Magnet is an audio version. And I'd like to say to David, real quick, David and Edward, I hope you might consider looking at my book, because I would love to have industry input on how close I came to being realistic, because that was my goal. And I still have my
Okay.
sequel to write. So I'll leave it at that and turn it over to Edward.
Is it my
thank
turn?
you, Scott. It is your turn.
Okay, my books are available. All of my books are available on Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, and Reader's Magnet. I hope before the end of this month, this is February, to have Werewolf on Madison Avenue in the bookstores in Barnes & Noble. We'll start in the metropolitan area, and if it happens, then I will be making personal appearances. I am on social media. I have 3 websites through Reader's Magnet. EdwardLipinski.com, which features all of my books. EdwardLipinskiBooks.com, which features all of my books, including my children's book, and a new website coming out, Books by Edward, which is going to feature my books, but with new covers on them, new designs. The first 2 books, Werewolf on Madison Avenue, is available in an audio book through Reader's Magnet. The second book, Visions of Destiny, the audio book is just being completed and will be available through Reader's Magnet. And the third book, Visions, Echoes of the Past, we're still working to find the right narrator for the audio book. I am on also YouTube, and if you look on YouTube, you will also see trailers for the book, which is for Visions of Destiny and for Werewolf on Madison Avenue. Why should people buy my book?
Yes.
Okay, quickly, because I need the money. Besides that, I think the books are
Honesty.
Besides that, I think the books are very entertaining, and each book is different. So when you read one, you've read one. You haven't read them all. That's all.
Gentlemen, I thank you. This has been just a super interesting hour to speak with all 4 of you. I invite all of you, anybody who has questions for the gentlemen, please look them up on their web pages and send them wherever they need to go. We've come to the end of chapter 5 of the Festival of Storytellers. And what an extraordinary international opportunity and event for authors, fairgoers, moderators, and staff. Reader's Magnet is the only publisher who sponsors an annual virtual event for full 2 weeks each year. And why? Because this event is not about the publisher. This event is about the authors, our books, our personas, and our brands. It's truly an opportunity for authors to share their story with the world, as this event has been broadcast in Canada, the United States, the United Kingdom, and Australia. To be sure, these events are not created in a vacuum. It takes many people months to plan, direct, and produce this event. The Reader's Magnet staff are truly guided by a dynamic executive management team. And there is communication on all levels, from the management to the staff, to the moderators, and to the authors who live stream in their booths. There are always going to be some technical glitches, but this is one of the most sophisticated and user-friendly platforms available for authors. The Festival of Storytellers showcases authors, allowing us the unique opportunity to share our stories, our inspirations, and our desires for better books with the world. Fairgoers have had the opportunity over the past 14 days to be educated, entertained, and to communicate with almost 100 authors. On behalf of all the authors who have participated, I extend gratitude to the management, all levels of the staff, and right down to the janitor who has turned out the lights every day. Success depends on collaborative efforts and everyone who works in an entity. As the Reader's Magnet author advocate, I declare season 5 of the Festival of Storytellers to have been a success. I look forward to season 6, and I do hope that when you see it promoted and advertised, you will join us again. I'd like to just do one small diversion and wish a happy birthday to one of the Reader's Magnet team, John Bines. We wish you a happy birthday. We wish you many years to come of success and prosperity. But until the next season of the Festival of Storytellers, please be safe, stay well, and as we say at Reader's Magnet, we share your story with the world. Bye for now.
Welcome to the Festival
of Storytellers.
I thank everybody that's involved with this process, because we know writers need readers and writers need publishers.
Experience is not about the publisher. It is about us, the authors.